Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. I'm your host, Brother Samuel.
And I'm your co-host, Brother Gabriel.
And today, craftsmen, we have something very special for you. If you're listening to this show, that means you must have some kind of an inkling towards Masonic knowledge or Masonic podcasts. Today, we have some really cool guys from Wisconsin, fellow brothers who too put on a Masonic podcast called Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. This is a podcast I myself listen to, and I love their content, and we are just absolutely honored to be able to sit down with them and have a talk about Masonic ideals and their lodge and their podcast and what made them decide they wanted to do a show. And I think by the end of this episode, craftsmen, you'll leave with knowing something new that you didn't know before, and maybe just have a small piece of what it's like to be a Mason in Wisconsin. Without too much more, we'll get straight into that interview. And today, we have Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew, with, you guessed it, Matt and Andrew. Welcome to the show, guys.
How's it going?
So, first off, we would just like to ask you, where are you guys from?
So I'll start. I'm Andrew, and I am actually from the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. Been here my entire life, so I've always kind of just lived around this area, and love living in Wisconsin, love living in Milwaukee. It's a great time.
And I'm Matt, and I'm also from the Milwaukee area. I spent about 4 years outside of Milwaukee in college up in northwestern Wisconsin, which was really enjoyable, and I don't know why I came back.
We all go home eventually, right?
Right.
So, what is your guys' home lodge?
Lake Lodge 189 for both of us. We both started here, and I'm currently Worshipful Master, and Andrew's currently Junior Warden.
Yep, Matt was one of the first people I met when joining Freemasonry. I think you were Junior Deacon at the time?
No, I would have been Junior Steward. I skipped Junior Deacon. So.
Oh, that's right. Yep. But yeah, so he's one of the first guys I met when we came in, and then a couple years later, now we have a podcast together. So yeah. Things happen weird like that.
Yeah, it's always funny how that stuff kind of comes together. You never imagine when you first meet someone like, hey, you're going to be my partner.
I have to listen to my voice so many days a week.
5 years ago when I first met Andrew, if you would have told me we would have had a podcast together, I would have said, no way.
Come on, guys. It's not that bad.
Yeah, ours
came on a little strong.
Ours was pretty similar. Gabe actually was talking to me out on the balcony one night when I was just mad about something in the lodge or something in the meeting, and I was just venting, and he's like, "You should start a podcast."
It really was that cliche, like, I hear you're complaining, bro. Go start a podcast and complain about it. And here we are.
I called him the next day. I was like, "So I know you were kidding, but seriously though, you think?" And here we are.
That's how every podcast starts that way. We're just like, we should have a podcast.
That was kind of how we got started. We like kind of joked about it for a minute, and I think we actually like legitimately talked about it for like almost a year before we pulled the trigger on doing it. So
really, wow.
Yeah. We took our sweet time, and then asked the Grandmaster to give us approval to do it, and shockingly enough, he said yes.
Did you guys have to get Grand Lodge permission to do something like that?
We didn't have to.
It's kind of a gray area.
It is a gray area. We felt like it was appropriate to just kind of ask to be on the up and up with it. So we did end up asking, and then we were on a 3-month probationary period to kind of see what the content was going to be like and stuff like that. And then they came back after our first 3 months and said, yeah, you guys are good to keep going. So.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. We happen to have another we have a couple of podcasts here in our area. The biggest one, I would say, arguably for us right now, is The Traveling Man with Jim Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually he works for the Grand Lodge. And it was, we kind of got to talking to him about it before everything got started. And he was like, oh, you should be good. Just don't do anything I wouldn't do. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean?
Right.
So every once in a while I'm listening to our recording and I'm like, oh, no, we're going to just delete that.
If I had a nickel for every time when I'm editing our episodes where I go, I don't like how we sounded when we said that. And I just go, I'm just going to clip this little chunk in between and make it sound like it never happened.
Exactly. So who actually approached the idea of having a podcast first? What gave you guys the idea to start one?
If I remember correctly, we were at the local pub and we were talking about Masonry after a meeting. And I think we were both laughing and we're like, dude, we would be great on a podcast or something like that. I forget who said it, but I know it was kind of like we've joked around with it for a while.
I think it kind of came up like somewhat organically for us because Andrew and I have always had very varying conversations out at the pub after stated meetings or just going out together. And they usually revolve around Masonry. And we were like, if we could take these conversations and put them on a microphone and record them, they would probably be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
No, please go ahead.
So, I just want to know a little bit more about your guys' home lodge. You said Lake Lodge number 189. And is that a large lodge for your area? You guys got a lot of membership, good membership on the sidelines for your meetings?
So our total membership is right around 200 Master Masons right now. We are the biggest lodge in the state of Wisconsin.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we usually get anywhere between 20 and 30 people on the sidelines.
So as the junior warden who has to plan the meals,
There you go.
and I went through every single minute book to see our average. We get between 33 and 40 members pretty consistently. There's a couple of outlying meetings where it might be in the middle of summer and people are on vacation that it'll take like a light dip down to probably like 24, 23, but usually it's around 30 to 40 people on the sidelines for standard stated meetings. Degrees can get a little bigger because at our last Master Mason this week, we had 49 people. So a lot of visitors came in to watch the degree. So that can kind of mess with the numbers too and make it a little higher.
Yep.
That's actually some very impressive numbers.
Those are pretty good numbers. So what drew you guys to this particular lodge? Was it just one that was close to you guys? Was it the ones that you met Masons from first?
So for me, I was working at a Harley Davidson dealership for a little while, and there was a kid that worked down in service with me who was always talking about demolay. And demolay this and demolay that, and finally one day I was like, what is this demolay talking about? And he explained to me that it was a youth organization attached to Freemasonry, and I had always been interested in Freemasonry, and this is where his dad ended up being a member of this lodge, and he was who I got to know first, and actually one of my best friends now, and so yeah, that's how I ended up here at Lake.
For me, it was my old house was about 6 minutes from this lodge building, and my new house is also like 6 minutes from this lodge building. And so at the time, I had never met a Mason, and I was interested in it because I picked up Freemasons for Dummies randomly, and I read it.
Nice.
And because I put it on my wish list many years ago, my buddy in college's dad is a member of a lodge in Kenosha, and we were trying to join in college, but then we realized we were too broke, so we didn't. But so I forgot about it for many years, and I saw on my Amazon wish list, they were like, that book you want's on sale. And I went, oh, sweet, I did want to read that book. And I read like one chapter, and I said, there's a lodge like right around the corner. I'm going to reach out. So at the time, the way the system worked is if you didn't know anyone to reach out specifically, you would reach out to the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin. They would put you in touch with the district deputy Grand Master for that area. And they would call you and be like, hey, here's what I'd recommend based on where you're located. And the brother who called me was Jeff Teeley, who's a member of Lake Lodge. And he's like, hey man, you're interested in Freemasonry Tuesdays or Thursdays? And I went, what? He's like, would you rather meet on a Tuesday or a Thursday? And I went, Thursday. And he goes, okay, come visit Lake Lodge then, because that was our meeting day. And so then I just came and away I went.
Yeah, and actually, the funny part of that story is we both owe Jeff Teely then for the beginning of our Masonic career, because that's whose son I was working with at the dealership. So.
Mm-hmm.
Small
Daddy happy.
world. It's almost like Masonic connections really
Run deep.
Really run deep.
Right.
So we've learned a little bit about how you guys joined, and then how long have you guys been Masons for?
I will be a couple weeks from now. I will have been a Mason a Master Mason for 6 years.
Oh, okay.
So then I would be a Master Mason for 5 years.
And now you're going to be Worshipful Master, Matt, right? You're sitting in the East right now? Or
I'm
Matt is currently.
Nope. Yep, I am currently sitting in the East right now. Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty good. You got right into the officer line then as soon as you joined.
I did. I was raised at the end of August in 2018, and then I was installed as junior steward in that December.
Wow.
And then the senior steward ahead of me didn't want to move up the line at all. And then we had a junior deacon fall out of the line. So I skipped from junior steward to senior deacon. And then COVID happened. So I ended up spending 2 years as senior deacon because we held the line since we were dark for almost a year. Mm-hmm. And then I got to finish progressing through. So.
Wow.
And I've been a Mason for 5 years because I joined a year after Matt did. And I'm the junior warden. I didn't really have to skip very many chairs. We had the same issue with we call it the junior deacon curse, where if someone's going to drop out, it's usually going to be the junior deacon after the don't years. And we think it's because that's right when responsibility starts to get really sets in, and you're like, oh my God, I have to really commit to this. So we had a junior deacon that was a psychologist during COVID, and his practice exploded because of the mental health needs. So he's like, hey, I just don't really think I have the time to really go further. So then I basically served a year as the senior steward, junior deacon, where I didn't get any of the responsibilities take off. I just did both. So I kind of just ran both those at the same time. I mean, I did degrees in the higher chair, but I would still work in the kitchen. Which is fine. I mean, the senior steward is an easy chair to kind of, ritually speaking, in our area, it's not that complicated. So it's pretty easy if you've done junior to kind of be like, it's similar vibes. So, and then I just progressed chair by chair since then.
And I'm sure you're really looking forward to your term in the hot seat, if so elected.
I'm really looking forward to being senior warden next year and having slightly less work than I do right now as the junior warden.
So you guys put a lot of your lodge culture puts a lot of extracurricular responsibility on the wardens then. Because
specifically the junior warden.
Yeah, we don't have
specifically me.
Yeah, we don't. The junior warden doesn't coordinate food for our lodge or anything. The junior warden and the senior warden just kind of exist.
So in our lodge, at least, I don't know if I would say culturally, it's pretty similar in most lodges in Wisconsin, with some variation. The master oversees planning, and they're the head honcho, like you would expect anywhere. Mm-hmm. The senior warden is usually assisting and backing up the master and then planning for their year.
Yeah.
And does the wellness committee.
Yep, and does the wellness committee, so makes calls to everyone to see how they're doing. Mm-hmm. So their year is a little bit lighter because they need to be planning, but also the wellness committee gives them an opportunity to get face-to-face contact with all the membership, which is nice to prepare them for going into the East. The junior warden actually is in charge of refreshment, right? So that means for me, every event that's an extracurricular, except with some few exceptions, is up to me to plan, manage, and staff. Wow. With the assistance of the master.
And do the cooking, grocery shopping,
cooking in the kitchen, making the big meals. I mean, it's kind of like a junior. I'm basically the master at refreshment, if that makes sense. So when we're not in degrees, I'm kind of in charge of making sure that, with the assistance of the master. I mean, obviously Matt can come up and be like, "I'm still in charge," and you're like, "Yeah," but it's usually left to me mostly at that moment. So.
The junior warden responsibilities at Lake are actually, it makes it for fairly hard year, and you're always busy. I mean, because we cook a meal for almost every stated. Every now and then we'll do like pizzas, but
Not me.
no, you haven't. We cook a meal for pretty much every stated. So once a month, you're doing grocery shopping and stuff like that, and then degree works, you're getting little snacks or a cake if it's a Master Mason degree. And then we typically have 3 or 4 events a year that are also cooking related that, you have to run there. So it's a really busy year. However, I feel like that really sets you up well for when you get to the East, because you're just about as busy in the East, just with more like administrative stuff. So it kind of sets up your expectations well. And actually, while I was senior warden, I was scrambling to find stuff to do. Even though I was planning for my year in the East, I was just like, I'm supposed to be doing other stuff, ain't I? And coming out of that junior warden year, I just felt like,
I'm traumatized right now. What can I do? I need to do something.
It's got to be a huge weight off your shoulders once you go from the junior warden into the senior warden spot, because now you can kind of, like you said, you're looking for stuff to do. You're like, well, I was so busy before. What do you need help with?
It's your resting period before your year in the East, kind of.
And I'm sure
I didn't take a break. I was just like, hey, I have this idea. We're going to do it.
Yep.
So
it's kind of interesting how you guys do that, because here in Ohio, that's a little bit differently, because we put a lot of that actually on the stewards. The 2 lodges that I'm part of, Genoa and Findlay, they both put a lot of that on the stewards. The stewards are responsible for the meal prep, the cleaning, the everything like that. They take a very literal definition to the word steward.
And of course, that's in theory. Our lodge currently has, I would say, maybe 20 people that show regularly.
Yeah.
Plus the officers. And really it ends up being, we all have to kind of help out, and we all kind of have to do it. However, Ryan over here ends up doing most of our maintenance. He was just fixing a bathroom door before we got on the microphone, and and he was just saying some choice words while he was fixing this door, because I think he's fixed it 3 or 4 times now.
Well, and our stewards don't escape that responsibility. They're just, I manage the steward. So basically it's a 3-person team, right? So I'm like the kitchen manager and they're the kitchen hands, more or less. So
that's so
basically
effective.
My side of the responsibility is like, when I tried to explain to them, they were like, you're not working like a steward anymore. And I said, I'm not a steward anymore. I said, I'm the warden. So I have to make sure the event exists and that there's stuff there to cook. And I need to also like make sure everything's running well. So a lot of the actual core work falls to the stewards to assist me in saying, this is what I need you. I need you to start flipping burgers. I need you to start setting up this and that. When you're done with that, I need you to run out and start setting up some tables. So I basically am the planner manager, and they're the hands of the work a lot of the time, going around. And I'll jump in on dishes. I'll jump in on where I can. But since I need to have a broader vision of the entire event, I might be pulled away here and there. And so a lot of that falls on theirs. I'm kind of jumping around to manage the entire event. So,
Well, that sounds to me like a really great way to run a lodge, and it sounds like you guys have been making a good work of it. But I do have a question for you about just the 2 of you. Did you guys know each other before lodge, or did you kind of get to know each other during lodge and then start hanging out afterwards, start going to the pub together with the other officers, other members? How did that kind of get started?
So my first time meeting Andrew was the first time.
Be nice.
was the first time he walked into the lodge building to come check it out.
Spaghetti dinner.
Yep. And it was a very interesting beginning to our relationship, because I liked him right away. I thought he was a cool guy, and but he came on a little strong. He was Mr. Anthropology degree and thought he knew everything under the sun there for a while.
I do. That's the thing is, I do know everything under the sun.
But he's settled down a bit, so our relationship has really grown over the years, and it's actually been really enjoyable to watch his personality change since he's became a Mason, and just the growth that's occurred.
Well, the key to my quote unquote personality changing is you learn when you're hanging out in a group of very mixed company of people from all different walks of life, personalities and all this stuff, that a personality that you might have been able to use with, a lot of my close friendships are friends I've known since high school or through college. You have to kind of find like a middling, more, I don't know if decorum is the right word. I don't think anyone's ever said I had decorum, but something in the middle to kind of match the energy of, a past master, an older member, a new young guy, and kind of find the way to be the bridge between both types and still be able to enjoy harmony together. So it's a work in progress. I still ruffle feathers, but I don't mind.
Well, no, I really like that. I think that's a really important thing to do, especially where we are in. I mean, I don't know how your guys' lodge numbers are in Minnesota, but
or Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Sorry, Gabe's running on very little sleep today.
But here in Ohio, we kind of have kind of an overarching membership, not crisis, but we're kind of on a downward trend, and we're trying to work on ideas of how to bridge the gap between older Masons who have been around for a long time and newer, younger Masons, as well as new guys coming in who have zero exposure to Masonry in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great mentality to have towards it, is just trying to be being the bridge guy to connect with the old guys, but also maintain what makes you part of the newer, younger generation too.
Yeah. And like the challenge is that it's a two-way street, right? You have the older guys who they have their own ideas, and you have the younger guys and they all have their own ideas. And, our lodge has always had a very good mix. So we have, a couple of the far older guys, like 90-year-old down to 70s, they're hanging out. They still enjoy coming to lodge. We have 21-year-old, 22, 23-year-olds. We have a bunch of 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. So we have a nice mix. And I think the thing that has been working in our lodge is we've created a mutual respect where the older members don't just obstruct new ideas. They might challenge them lightly, but in like good faith, they'll be like, hey, have you thought about this? Like, we need to be concerned about ABC, but they won't flat out say, we're not doing that. They might challenge you, which is good because they're using their wisdom and their experience. Like, we tried something like that, so that you really think about your ideas, but they won't obstruct. And the younger generations has been pretty good in our lodge of trying to find a way to find a compromise with them to try to make both parties happy, and then we move forward. And what happened is over time, that's built trust with the older past masters to know that we're doing good things and they're in good hands. And that trust has made them more involved and more interested in things like that. So it just took years to kind of build that.
Yeah, I would say that's one of our biggest strengths is we have a really strong core of past masters who are not going to be like, no new ideas. We can't do that. We can't do this. We can't spend money on that. They're all very receptive to good ideas. And if somebody presents a good idea, well, they will be open to it and throw their support behind it. So.
Well, and I really like that because we often joke. There was a time, at least at our lodge, where we used to call them the old guard. Pretty much the word was no for 90%. I mean, we once had an argument for the front of our building. There used to be this big metal, ugly, like storm cage over the front of the building. And I think they argued about it for 6 months about whether or not we should take it off or do something with it. And finally, one of the past masters, Jim Taylor, who was on our show before, he said, look, I will handle it and I'm taking it down. I don't really care what you have to say. It's a safety issue. And they kind of, grumbled about it. And when they went to go take the cage down, there was literally one bolt holding the cage onto the side of the building.
So good, Lord.
And then once they took it down and we painted the building, I mean, we paid for everything. It was a big, big thing. I mean, for almost 3 weeks they were working on it. And finally, one of the older past masters that was really angry about taking it down kind of walked up and went, okay, the building does look much better now. And we're like, see?
Fancy that.
But
Yeah.
it's we always joke that when we're those old past masters one day, we have to be much more understanding. You know, I plan on standing up and going, well, we tried that back in our day, but you know what, let's do it. Let me know how I can help you do it, because
and I've always told them the value in allowing people to make mistakes too. I say, you know, you can't protect them from every mistake, and mistakes help you learn. And so if you don't think that mistake's going to implode the entire lodge, then you don't really need to be stopping it. If you're like, well, we could lose $150, you're like, it's worth the gamble to really get a member who feels fully invested and feels like a part of his lodge. I'd spend that money to make a member feel that this is not a place they visit. It's a place that's a part of them and they're a part of it. And if it works, you go, awesome, we did a great thing. And if it falls on its face, you go, well, what did we learn for next time? When we think about events, let's make sure we think about these, and you can then learn and develop people through mistakes too. And so unless you're going to bankrupt the lodge, there's no reason to just obstruct for the sake of, you know, not allowing people to try something.
Yeah, that's a great way of handling events like that, because the more personable connection with Freemasonry, I think is the way to go. Because I know a lot of guys have been drawn into the whole secret society thing, into the past kind of like esoteric philosophical draw of Freemasonry, which is still there. But I think a more personable connection for both retaining members as well as getting new guys involved, especially when they come knocking at the door, is a great way to move on into the future of not recruiting into Freemasonry, but to welcoming guys who knock at the door of Freemasonry.
Well, and I think it's important for us to remember that if we're not providing something of value or making people want to be here, they're just not going to be here, right? So if they don't have a personal attachment or a personal investment, you know, we always talk about making good men better. Well, part of becoming a better version of yourself is learning through your mistakes, or learning by being put in charge of something and being, you know, put to task. So keeping people involved is the way to keep them coming back. Otherwise, what are they getting out of being a member of the organization?
That's actually a really good question, and it actually kind of leads into one of the questions that we have for you guys. You know, talking about that personal experience, what is it about Lake Lodge that makes you so proud of it? Or do you have any proud moments that your lodge kind of does in your local community or something like that just makes you so proud to say that I'm a member of this lodge and not any other one?
So that's a very, very long list of things I could go through. What I think sets Lake Lodge apart from the rest is there isn't just one thing we are good at. We do multiple things well, right? So we hold a very high standard for our degree work and ritual work. We do large events all the time, like we have a spaghetti dinner, a breakfast with Santa, soup and chili night, cook off, you know. So we're planning large events, we're doing that kind of stuff. We're very active, and we stay very busy. I think I had 17 events on the calendar this year.
Wow.
We do education at every meeting.
Yeah, education at every meeting.
That's really good.
And you know, we just keep plugging along, and we have a good time with each other. We do fellowship well. Fellowship's very important to us. You know, we just kind of do it all well. I mean, I think my proudest moment this year, honestly, I don't even want to take any credit for anything. I think my proudest thing this year is the team of officers, and just having seen so many of them step up to the plate and grow into their roles and starting to develop their own leadership styles and stuff like that. It's been wonderful to see, and they're here for it, and they want to be involved, and they're active, and they work like crazy, and you know, it's making all of our visions come true. And I think it's great that we're all moving in the same direction.
Well, I really like that.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, no worries. For me, the biggest thing that I've always been proud of at our lodge is its culture. I have traveled a fair bit. I've seen a lot of lodges that have fun cultures, unique, interesting cultures that are great. But I think there's just something very special in what has been created at our lodge over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, I can hear stories where our lodge, I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, had kind of a slump. And there were some issues, and some of the past masters that we say are still very active were the masters who went through and started righting the ship, and they all are still here enjoying the fruits of their labors. So we inherited a culture from them. And it's always been described to me as Lake Lodge has a work hard, play hard culture, which in the corporate world means it's toxic. In the Masonic world, it means it's great. So, so like a lot of the stuff we've always said, they said, if we start not doing the work well, we will no longer be doing the play. And so the past masters tell us that straight to our face. They go, if we're not keeping a high standard, we're not going to the pub. We are only going to be able to do the fun events if we are doing the work. So there's a pretty high standard we hold ourselves to, because we just want that sweet, sweet pint at the end of the day. So we have to work hard. And for a long time, what we've been trying to do the last 5 years is, like Matt was mentioning, provide value, right? And I've always tried to conceptualize it as Masons fall into 3 buckets: brotherly love, relief, and truth. And in one of those buckets, they will fall into more than another, or they might have preference. But you need to make sure that your lodge represents all 3. It needs to be providing fellowship. It needs to be providing community service and charitable works and supporting brothers. And it needs to be providing education and further growth of the individual. And when you start looking at that, when you're planning your calendars, you start going, we need to make sure that we're finding ways to fill these 3 buckets so that every personality type in Masonry that has their interests has an interest here, at least represented in a certain way. And we have tried very hard to do that at Lake, and it has been paying off in dividends. And members who are past masters who we haven't seen in a long time, who might have disappeared during those rough years 20 years ago, they're starting to come back. And they're like, I don't know, I haven't been back in 15 years. What's been going on? And then they stay. And so it's really kind of a cool thing to be in this history of Lake at the current time that I'm in it, because it's just a fun time to be here.
Well, and that's really inspiring, especially to us, because like I said, our lodge is really having a hard time coming back from COVID. I mean, we were kind of on the upswing for a long time, and then, that just shutting everything down. And all of our past masters, we have a big list of past masters, but a lot of them snowbird for most of the year. So sometimes getting these guys to come back, it's been kind of an uphill battle. But now we're getting some younger guys in. We've got a bunch of guys on the rosters getting through these degrees. Once we go back from our summertime break, as we like to call it, we have a full list of degrees to put on for these guys, and it's inspiring to me, because all this advice that you're giving of what your guys' lodge does, it's exactly the kind of thing that I would love to see here at Genoa.
Absolutely.
You really do got to find that thing. Everybody's got something they're looking for, and we really do need to try and find a way to fill those buckets. I think that's phenomenal. Instead of trying to focus on one thing and getting tunnel vision, we need to see what we can do to try and spread that out a little bit and try to provide something for everyone. It's phenomenal.
Looking at the big picture.
Yes.
It's always helpful. Mm-hmm.
And not getting that tunnel vision of degree to degree to degree and checking boxes.
Right. And it's not something, every lodge should be capable of like hitting those at least a little bit of each, right? But, each lodge obviously ends up developing its own culture. So you might have a lodge that likes to travel a lot, and they're the ones that everybody knows gets out and gets around and visits other lodges and always comes out and supports other people's degrees and stuff like that. But maybe they don't do many degrees of their own because they just would rather send their candidates through like a 1-day class or whatever. They just don't have the manpower at this point to be able to put on their own degrees, but they travel and they support and they do everything else, right? And that's great. And you have another lodge that's known for putting on large events, and they're great at doing that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a lodge being like focused on what they do well, as long as you incorporate some of the other stuff and try to get a little bit better at it. Like I identified, before I got into the East, I identified 2 things I wanted to see Lake do better. And one of that was be out in the community more, and the other one was travel better. And so in our district here, we have what's called the Traveling Lodge Award. If a principal and 2 other members of the lodge visit every lodge in the district over a 12-month period, you get the Traveling Lodge Award. So,
which is how many lodges?
14. We have 15 total, including ourselves in our district. So we have 2 lodges left to go to finish that this year, and we'll have that wrapped up by October, which, accomplished one of my goals of being, traveling more and getting out there more and being out in the community more. We did a park cleanup, and we have a blood drive coming up. Those were 2 of the big things I put on.
Those are nice events.
And don't forget your senior steward putting one more thing on to help you with your goal too, and bring us out to go to one of the biggest music concerts in our area, which is called concert series called Chill on the Hill, which brings in thousands of people to a park every single week. And he's having us set up a booth there. And so he went to the past masters and the whole lodge with a presentation saying, this is how much it's going to cost. He figured everything out and he goes, let's do it. He asked for $1,000 and a past master stood up. And I went, here it goes. And he goes, I would like to vote we give him $1,500. And we're like,
whoa.
Yeah. So actually increase the budget. And, that's something that, again, I've been extremely proud of coming out of the younger guys and younger Masonry guys and the guys that are newer to the line, just being like, hey, I have this idea. And I told everybody from the beginning, if you have an idea and you tell me about it and I think it's a good idea, I'm going to let you run with it, but you're on the hook for it. It's now your baby. I'm not going to do the work for your idea. It's your idea. So if you want money from the lodge, if you want to put it together, if you need volunteers, that's all on you, and you're going to take charge of that event. And I think that gives them
responsibility to the members too.
Right. Exactly.
Ownership. Mm-hmm.
So I do want to kind of tie into something, because we've been talking about you guys a lot as Masons and getting to kind of know you guys as Masons. And I really like it. I think you guys are fine, upstanding Masons. And I want to know, because this is just something we kind of get a feel for some of our interviewees. What do you kind of take away from Masonry into your real life? Do you kind of use some of the principles to help you in your profession, like what you do for work? Were you thinking a certain way before you joined, and then when you joined, did it spur you on to doing things a little bit differently?
So for me, I think, coming into Masonry, I consider myself a good man. So a lot of the moral teachings, I come from a Catholic family, so there was some that were, really pushed into me to begin with. But so a lot of the moral teachings were already pretty foundationally well. It just encouraged me to take them very seriously. And I think the biggest ways I've seen changes is the willingness to offer help to brothers and non-brothers, just anyone looking for help, and to reach out a helping hand if someone needs something. To be like, yeah, I'll show up, we can fix this, we can go do that, and kind of step out and say, yeah, I'm a servant of the people, I'm a helper. And it's really helped me grow my confidence as far as in myself, being able to say, like, I have value, I have good ideas, I can do things, I can make things happen. A good example is yesterday I had 15 people coming to my house, and Claire's like, can you cook for them? And I was like, oh boy, can I? I usually do 33, man. I was like, yeah, we got to get this, we got to get that, we're going to put this together. And just the ability to kind of, work with people and be able to be hospitable and be able to help and serve. And then, I get a lot of gratification from studying the craft as well. And for me, it's an inspiration. I find it inspiring. It makes me feel more of a urgency to try to work on myself, to learn things, acquire new skills, and to serve people around me, for me personally.
Man, that was a good answer, Andrew. Now I actually have to say something intelligent.
Well, then we're in big trouble.
I'm going to echo Andrew a little bit on that. I would say the three biggest things that Freemasonry has brought into my day-to-day life are probably confidence, empathy, and patience. It would
Very
be
nice.
my three biggest takeaways. Before I became a Freemason, I was deathly afraid of public speaking. And now I have a podcast. Microphones used to make me go, sweaty and clammy and lock up, and my voice tremble and everything else. And so now I can get up in a room with 500 people in it without a problem. So that's been a big confidence builder. And the patience thing, I've always been a little bit of an impatient person, and sometimes quick to anger, and just with sometimes how fast things move in Masonry, or how slow things move in Masonry. It's taught me to be a little more patient and let things come together. And then, empathy, I find myself caring more for my brothers now and people outside of it. And, I feel like a lot of that's translated into being a relatively new dad with a 3-year-old at home too. It's really helped me be a better father.
Well, I really like that, guys. That's an incredible view of kind of the universality of Freemasonry, because those are the same kind of answers we've gotten here in Ohio and everywhere else. And it just goes to show how much of an impact this fraternity has, just kind of nationwide and worldwide, on making good men better men, which is the entire point. So we'd like to go ahead and take a quick intermission and get into the podcast element of your guys' Masonic career, if that sounds pretty good.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right, perfect. Listeners, thank you for joining us on the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. We're going to go to intermission, and we hope that you'll join us for the next part of the interview. Welcome back, craftsmen, to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. We're rejoined by Matt and Andrew from Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew.
Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
So we kind of talked about it in the earlier portion, but for anybody that might be jumping in a little bit later, what made you guys decide to start a Masonic podcast? Why go that route versus maybe a different route?
Well, Andrew and I, we what's the best way to put this?
Be nice.
I'm trying to be nice. Jeez. As you can tell, we give each other a lot of grief, which is part of the beauty of our relationship.
Absolutely.
But, we always found ourselves having interesting conversations, and a lot of times we were of the same mind. It's very rare we disagree, which is something we've been told we need to do more often on the show, but it's really hard to find a topic we disagree on. But we were always having what we thought were fascinating conversations. At least, the two of us felt like we were having these fascinating conversations, and we felt like, hey, wait a minute, why aren't we sharing these conversations? We're someone insightful. We come from slightly different backgrounds. I'm a little bit more of a blue collar guy. Andrew's a little more of an intellectual. So we felt like that dynamic would play off well. The practical side of Freemasonry versus the esoteric side of Freemasonry and stuff in the podcast. And, that was ultimately what we were trying to achieve, was the dynamic of kind of the fact that Freemasonry lives in both worlds and can exist there. So
I really like that.
And on top of that, the idea was like you said, I'm a little more esoteric than he is. He's a little more practical based, but we actually kind of both share an appreciation for both those perspectives. Like, I'm not one of those esotericists who are like, if you don't know Kabbalah, you don't know Freemasonry. Like, where you're like, okay, guys, chill out. Like, you're only so good in your armchair. You know what I mean? So, we always had this thing where we had like a nice circumscribed Masonry where we touch the edges occasionally, where like I might go into the esoterics and the edges, but we kind of all meet in the middle a little bit on a lot of these ideas. And what we really thought when we were starting to get a little more serious about saying, let's start a podcast, was what does Wisconsin need? So Wisconsin has a phenomenal podcast called the Further Light Podcast. It's education based. It's by the Education Committee. It does papers, all that good stuff. And I go, okay,
that's pretty.
So the historical and the historical / esoteric / that stuff, that is being taken care of very, very well. And I go, what niche do we need here that I think that they would benefit from? And we discussed it for a while. And I said, if I would do a podcast, I would want it to be as showing living Masonry that's here now. And I want to do that through talking with local brethren. I'm not talking just people in the purple. I'm not talking about higher ups. I'm talking about Joe Smo, who you see sitting on the bench and never sat in the East, just a guy who's been a Mason for 20 years. I want to hear his story. I want to hear Masons talking about being Masons, living Masons here and now, and see, like Matt was saying, that intersection between tradition in the past and the future, and how we meet in the middle there. And I said, that's what I want to do, and I want to promote Wisconsin Freemasonry through doing news and events and promoting Wisconsin Freemasons. And so that's kind of where we started building from there.
That's really nice.
I actually, it's so funny because the more we talk, the more I start seeing the similarities between your guys' show and our show. I too, I'm a very practical Mason. I'm a biker, and I don't dip too much into the esotericism, but Gabe does way more than I do, which is kind of crazy. But it's. We started our show for very similar reasons. There's plenty of shows out there. We wanted to show the Masons of today and to kind of have that record for the future going forward of things. And it's just so funny to see that how similar they are. I was just curious, do you guys have a goal for your show, something that you're hoping to achieve eventually?
Honestly, I feel like we've kind of taken it day by day. Originally, what my goal is personally, at least, it could be different for Matt, was I wanted to make something that was very ingrained in Wisconsin Masonry. And then, it's kind of like one of those things, like when I listen to your guys' podcasts or Meet at Park or some of the other ones out there, I like listening to them to say, I want to hear about the slice of life from Ohio. Like, I want to hear what is their Masonry like, because it's very similar, but it's fun hearing from a different place. And so my goal is I want to make sure that we are ingrained in Wisconsin as like the go-to Wisconsin Masons, like, well, I got to listen to it. This is for me. And then for the greater Masonic world, a place where they can come and get a glimpse at Wisconsin Freemasonry.
I like that. That's an incredible mindset to have for that, because that's exactly what we wanted to do. We started with the idea of virtual archive of Masonic stories, but then it did really turn into the every Mason share your story. Every Mason from every lodge share your story. We want to know about you. We want to know about what Masonry is like for you. And that has really turned into a lot of successful moments for us. It's turned into a lot of people even recognizing us at other lodges, people sending us messages on Facebook saying, hey, we're loving what you guys are doing. And I'm curious to know if it's the same for you guys. Do you guys get a lot of positive feedback? Do you guys get recognition? Do you guys have something that you've accomplished with your podcast that you think this is awesome? This is a proud moment for us in our podcast.
As far as the recognition goes, it's actually happened a couple of times to me personally. I went and visited another lodge, and this is probably the one that's meant the most to me so far, was they had a prospective member there who was joining for dinner, and was thinking about petitioning and everything else. And I introduced myself to him, and he goes, wait, like, are you like Matt from Time for Fellowship? And I'm like,
that's cool.
I'm like, yeah, actually. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to you guys. That's part of the reason, I was interested a little bit, but listening to you guys really pushed me over the edge, and that's why I'm here thinking about petitioning the lodge. And so that was really impactful. That moment was very impactful and really meant a lot to me. And I would say that it was probably never one of my intended goals, but looking back at it, I'm like, well, I guess that was kind of a goal accomplished. It was just a goal I didn't know existed. And then last time I just went and helped another lodge with a degree, and I walked in, and the junior deacon was like, oh, geez, the podcast guy's here. Now I better make sure I do a good job tonight, So, those kind of experiences are really fun, and we have gotten a lot of positive feedback. As far as, I think, my most proud moment of the podcast so far would probably be the episode we just did a couple episodes back, episode 43, with Worshipful Brother Paul Larson, because his story in Masonry is very unique, having found himself in a clandestine lodge prior to finding regular Freemasonry, and to be able to hear his story and talk to him about that was probably one of our bigger accomplishments on the podcast.
Not to mention also the lodges that have reached out to us. So a lot of our content, if you guys have listened, is about like ways you should improve lodge, like ways to clean things up. And we've had a couple of lodges reach out and say, like, we never thought about doing that. We're going to try that now.
Oh, right.
And those were the ones that really sat with me, where I'm like, are people actually listening to me, and they think it's important,
right,
and that they think there's value there? And that's what kind of shocked me. And I was like, all right.
Well, and to touch on that, I haven't even told you about this yet, because I keep forgetting to. A worshipful master from up north told me that he may play our Overseeing the Craft episode in lodge as an education piece.
Oh,
nice.
That's cool.
That is.
Did you also hear that we're on a rogue radio station out in Hustiford, where they take our episodes and blast them on the radio, apparently? And
that's incredible.
We had a brother reach out saying, like, I'd love to use your content when I need to use a bathroom break or something. It was kind of, and I was like, you got it, dude. And he's a listener, and he's a great brother. He came on and visited us at the annual communication episode. We talked to him a little bit, but yeah, he's got a radio station, and so he uses it sometimes, which is kind of cool.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty cool. Honestly, I think at our point, I think we'd be lucky if maybe somebody would play us on an elevator, maybe, hopefully one day. But have you guys had any kind of, I don't want to say negativity, but have you guys had any kind of obstacles since you've been doing this podcast?
We have. We ran into one major issue, and I'm going to keep some of the details out of it. But,
of course.
We were supposed to be interviewing somebody, and through doing a little bit of research prior to the interview, we discovered that he may not have been presenting himself appropriately. So we ended up having to cancel the interview, but just because of our conversations with him and stuff, that was our biggest obstacle, but that's about as much detail as I can go into.
No, that's
it wasn't that he wasn't a brother. It was the content that he was asking us to promote that we had some reservations about, and we tried to politely let him know, and we haven't heard anything since. So,
well, and I'm sure it's kind of like us. You kind of have to really be careful about what you talk about over the airwaves, because we're not it's not tiled or anything. Anybody can listen to what we're putting out there. So you kind of got to sit there and think, maybe that towed the line just a little too far, or what you're.
It wasn't really a tiling issue. It was, lightly you could say it had to do with the use of AI on content, and we decided to back away from it after. I use AI quite a bit for making various like posts and things like that, and I just noticed like, oh, this smells like AI, and after some testing it, pretty certain it is. So we kind of said, like, very politely, we said, I can't ever prove this, I don't know, but we no longer feel comfortable, and I'm sorry, like, we'll kind of keep it on the down low. We don't need to, nor do I want to step on a brother's toes like that, but it was enough for us to step away. So
yeah, no, and you're better off being careful about those kinds of things. How long have you guys been doing this podcast? I don't think I've ever asked.
We started at the end of September of 2023. So we are coming up on our 1 year. So,
wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's pretty cool. We just sat down and had our own meeting. What are we going to do once we hit that year mark? What kind of goals would we like to be setting? And it's hard to believe that even for us, we're only 6 months into this, and it feels like it's been way longer.
It wears on a person.
It really does.
But it's really impressive to be hitting that 1 year mark and seeing what you guys have coming forward. I routinely listen to your guys' content. I love listening to your guys' episodes when I'm cutting the grass, and it's kind of soothing. It's a chore that I don't really enjoy doing, but I'm like, oh, well, I can listen to Matt and Andrew while I'm cutting the grass and see what they're up to. And it's always a hit for me. I always feel like I leave your guys' show learning something or thinking about something in a different way than I personally would have thought of something, and I'm like, oh, that's so good. Like that's a great point. The one that really hit home for me was when you guys were talking about lodge culture. I can't think of what episode that was. Wasn't that long ago. It was a couple months ago though, but talking about your lodge's culture and how you kind of have to have a culture, otherwise everything that you're doing is kind of a moot point. And I kind of came back from that and was like, Gabe, what's our lodge's culture? And
I don't think I had a very good answer other than we have old guard guys who talk about how excellent our ritual used to be.
But I was like, well, we need to build a culture, and we need to get on that ASAP. And he's like, well, where'd you come up with this? I'm like, oh, this podcast I'm listening to, Time for Fellowship. He's like, oh, those guys seem pretty smart.
Well, we appreciate the kind words. We enjoy listening to you guys as well. And, on that lodge culture issue topic, that's something, it's like finding your identity, right? That's like growing into your own personality. That's figuring out who you are as a person. That's the same thing a lodge needs to do. And sometimes that needs to be reassessed potentially to kind of make sure that culture is still what you want it to be or where you want it to be. Or maybe it needs to change just slightly to, accommodate newer times and technologies and everything else. And, once you can find that as a lodge, I feel like that's when everything starts moving in the right direction.
Well, and we've always said too, you can always, when there's a mad culture, you don't feel anything. You walk in, you're like, these are nice guys. When there's a really good culture, you're like, wow, you feel energized. You're like, wow, there's a lot going on here. Oh my God. And the one that you notice the most is when you walk in on a bad culture or a toxic culture in a lodge, you almost can feel the air getting sucked out of the room. And you're like, oh my God, I could cut this air with a knife. And, so it is real. And we do feel it innately when you travel or when you visit lodges. You can get a pulse on the culture pretty quick. And, culture develops organically, sure. But we also forget that a lot of times that quote-unquote organic growth was actually planned, that various officers made efforts to say, take people aside and say, this stuff you're doing is not happening anymore. This stuff you're doing, we're going to keep doing more of, and stuff like that, and to kind of allow it to take, planting the correct seeds and letting them grow from there is something that happens too. So it's part organic and part effort of the officers and the members of the lodge.
Well, that's always addressing culture is a great thing to do. I agree with you that can seem organic, but it also requires a lot of planning and effort on the point of the key officers of the lodge, because they really do set precedent. They really can influence how members are doing things, how events are being run, what culture the lodge does want to have. But I do want to tie into a couple of things addressing on culture, but also addressing on your podcast, because I think podcasting is a great way to affect culture of the future. Change of the future. Yeah. To get the word out to lodges. And I think you guys are doing a great job of that. So especially coming up on your year mark, what kind of projects or big plans do you guys have for the future? Do you really want to be this beacon of culture recognition and change throughout your state? Are you looking to move on into having listeners in other states? Are you trying to connect with your Grand Lodge to start education and culture programs? What's really on your guys' minds going forward?
So, to be honest, we haven't really thought about it as far as that goes. We do have a lot of Wisconsin listeners, but we also do have a fair number of out-of-state listeners. And I think our vision with this podcast kind of from the beginning was we're going to do what we do and see where it ends up taking stuff. We never really had any grand designs for this. We just kind of started doing it because we thought it would be fun and we thought we had something to offer. And, wherever it goes, it goes. And, if people take something of value from it, great. And if people don't like us and think we don't know what we're talking about, well, good for them.
And they're right. So, and the thing is when I say that our target is on Wisconsin, it's because it's not that I don't want listeners from out of state. Absolutely, we'd love listeners out of state. Is that my thought was that if we expand too much, we lose our focus on what makes us special. Mm-hmm. And that's saying if we keep our eyes on presenting local Wisconsin Masonry, we're able to capture a slice of life better than if I am a podcast inviting, every author, podcaster, anyone, and that's still full of the content. You'd be like, well, now you're kind of representing Masonry Universal, but there's a lot of people who kind of do that. So that's why I try to, we're totally open to having guests out of state, but we never want it to be the core content. It's episodes here, episodes there for funsies because they're great content. It's fun to do. And it's fun to connect with brothers out of state. But I've always wanted the core of our content to revolve around two things: Wisconsin Freemasons and me and Matt talking about stupid stuff. And those are the two. As I said, the way we're going to be successful is we're not selling our content, we're selling our personalities. Is that people come to listen to Matt and I talk to each other, and Matt and I talk to someone else. And so I've said, if we want to be successful and keep it small, we as the personalities, as the bros or the hosts, whatever we call ourselves, are the characters, the standard characters you'll always hear in an episode. And then the guests come along and we get to enjoy us communicating and sharing fellowship. So when we call it time for fellowship, you're basically saying me and Matt are going to have fellowship, or we're going to have fellowship with other people. And you guys are forced to listen if you click the button. And, so I think our goal for in coming years, we want to try to build a studio in my radon-filled basement. So that's the next goal. I need to vet that radon, I think, but, we won't.
Everybody put your gas mask on. Yep. We're going down.
Come on down to the radon basement.
So if our episode starts sounding like womp, 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 you know what?
Yeah, great gas mask.
I really like the fact that you guys are very... you know what you want. I mean, it's you have your goal in mind. You know what you're trying to put out there. I mean, it really is important to see, like how things are from where you guys are from in Wisconsin. It's definitely to me, it's uplifting because, like I said, I listen to you guys pretty regularly when I can, and it's very how do I put this? It just makes me, it makes me feel like, hey, things are like this here. We don't have to be so different. We could get that. We could have 40, 50 guys sitting on the sidelines. We could make this happen, but it's only by seeing hey, this is what they're doing up here and it's working out so well for them. I think you're absolutely right in saying that, you guys are taking a piece out of what Masonry is for you guys and in your area and sharing it with the world. And it's definitely, it works. I mean, I enjoy it. I'm a regular listener, so.
Well, and I mean,
and we thank you guys so much for having us be one of the rare out-of-state members that you have on your podcast. We really appreciate that.
We've been excited for this for like weeks. So
no, we have been really excited for this, and we're really excited to reverse the roles in a few weeks here. We'll figure out some scheduling and flip it around and bring you guys over on ours.
Well, we look forward to it. I was actually really excited when I was listening to not your most recent one. It might have been a couple of them when you were like, oh, and we're probably going to be on another podcast soon. And I was like, that's us.
It'll also be really interesting for us to be in the hot seat because Sam, you and I haven't had much of a chance to give our opinions or anything. We've taken people's opinions and asked questions, but we don't give a lot of our own experiences.
It'll be different.
It'll be really weird. It'll be interesting.
I love it though.
I can admit it is kind of odd to be on the other side of this.
I don't know. I always run my mouth anyway.
That's true.
So as we kind of tie up this, we would just like to ask, what would you like to leave behind for Masonry in the future?
And not like 10 years from now, we're talking 50, 80 years from now, when you guys are just a picture on the past masters wall. What do you want future Masons to know about you? Or what piece of advice would you like to leave for future Masons?
Oh boy,
I got it.
He's like, I got it.
I think I got it at least. As far as like a legacy that I want to leave behind when it comes to Freemasonry is that, and I don't really care if my name's attached to it or anything else. I just want to know that I had a small part in developing the future leaders of this lodge and potentially the fraternity as they were coming up in the line behind me, and didn't just create followers per se, but helped create leaders inside and outside the lodge that can benefit the lodge and their communities and pass those good leadership skills down onto the future generations after me. And I think my piece of advice that I would give to anybody out there is find your own voice. And, before you can lead, you need to follow. But once you start leading, remember that if you think you're doing the right thing, do it and, move forward with it, and don't just follow what like the past masters might want you to do or something like that. If you're confident that you're making the right decisions, just run with it.
That's a
great piece of advice.
Mine's gonna be worse. So,
oh, it's okay, Andrew. It's all right.
So, for me, I've never had any grand designs. I've never thought about trying to become a Grand Lodge official or anything like that. I would just like my legacy to be that I was present, I worked hard, and that I left the craft better than I found it. And I've always loved doing mentorship at Lodge. When I was a junior steward, I was also doing mentorship of 3 of the newer guys coming in. Even though I just finished my work, I started teaching them the work.
That's a perfect time to do it.
And I've started to, with my mentees, I've watched them grow. I've watched them go from being kind of quiet, not necessarily all that confident, to them leading presentations and getting a $1,500 approval to go and do something. And I love mentoring and just working with the new members and trying to, not everyone practice what they preach in Masonry. And I think the best way to promote that is by mentorship and getting them right off on the right foot immediately so that they can start working on building their edifice. And so I would like to just leave having mentored lots and lots of people, enjoyed fellowship with my brothers, and then people point at my picture and be like, That guy was fun.
I like that.
That's also a great thing to have. I don't know if I'll ever be the guy who's pointed on the wall and says that guy was fun, but I hope to have a picture.
I know
of
I
me
will
on
be.
the past master's wall, and
I know I will be the one that went, he was fun.
And and my piece of advice to any Mason, newer Mason, older Mason, that I've always tried to promote is don't stop learning. Keep pushing for more knowledge. I don't care if it's Masonic knowledge. Please include some of that. Learn about, grammar, learn about rhetoric, study, be a life learner, and you'll always find reward, and it will improve you as a man. And so I seek oftentimes to inspire the new members who may have not ever read a book in 10 years since high school or something like that, and be like, pick up the book again and start to learn again. And that's one thing that I've always liked to push members to do is learn and grow.
That's really good advice.
It is
You're
great advice.
never too old to learn something new.
never.
Never too young to start learning something new.
I'm gonna steal the line from worshipful brother Patrick Tessier down in Florida. ABL and ABT, always be learning and always be traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Oh, that's cool.
I like that. That might be a nice tattoo someday.
Oh, jeez. You have to get the first one first.
Yeah, I know. Well, gentlemen, we want to thank you very much for coming on our podcast with us. This has been incredible to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for your support of even coming on to our podcast in the first place. We can't begin to thank you enough for giving us the recognition. Just to hear from out-of-state brothers that they think that we're doing a great job too, as much as we like you guys for the job you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we love it. It's a great job. I really love listening to you guys. I started having to drive my newborn son all the way to my parents' house twice a week. And so it's always on Tuesday. So right after Monday, you guys release, I pop on and listen to it on the ride home or on the ride to my parents before work. So
well, we hope you like our episodes that we'll have coming out soon. We've got quite a few in the chamber ready just to pull the trigger on our release date. So
Excellent.
We're looking forward to it, and we're looking forward to your guys' next episodes too.
And remember, listeners, that is Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew, and you can find them anywhere you find your normal podcast.
We're on Facebook, Twitter, whatever,
Instagram and TikTok, and we have timeforfellowship@gmail.com. So, feel free to hit us up on any one of those, and keep your eyes out for as we post stuff. So
wonderful. Well, Craftsman, thank you for tuning in to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. Thank you for joining us with our interview with Matt and Andrew from A Time for Fellowship with Matt and Andrew. And remember, Craftsman,
keep your working tools in order
and always be on the level.